went down. Okay, so so the thing is that repac's upon us, and it's going to happen before ATSC 3 really hits. Okay, I mean we got to get going. It's the law of the land. Bill Lake from the Media Bureau was asked a couple years ago at one of the ATSC annual meetings if we would allow ATSC 3 as part of the repack, considerations for that as part of the repack. Is the FCC thinking about this, whatever? And he said, absolutely not. The goal is to get spectrum cleared, move spectrum out. That's what it is, right? So, but the position has changed a little bit. There's been a lot of broadcasters lobbying Washington, and so there's been a break in the dam to allow ATSC 3 on a voluntary basis and so forth. So you're heading into a repack situation, and if you want to future-proof what you're doing, I think it's time to think about a couple of key things at your plant. Okay, there's the reimbursement fund. The reimbursement fund is not going to pay for anything that's not like for like or affected. Okay, so they're not gonna buy you an HEVC encoder. You know, those kinds of things. You're not going to be able to submit those for reimbursement. But perhaps there's some things we should think about. I won't bore you with the definition of repack. I think you know what's happening. How likely is repack for my station? You just answered that with your show of hands. And the FCC's post-auction transition plan, you know, I think you're all familiar with that. You're going to be in one of 10 possible transition phases. Some people say that they don't even make sense. There's different phases in different markets. Why would we do that? I'm not sure how that was worked out. But you know, the tool to classify that looked at many variables, including complexity, stations move, and power height. Many unverified assumptions were baked into the plan, and no consideration for zoning, permitting, land use changes, weather factors, tower structural changes. Well, it's the federal government, okay? So, you know, there's a couple of morals to that story, right? And one of them is like, look, if we allowed for all of these realities, quote unquote, then we can't impose this 39-month deadline, you know, and part of the thing is that, you know, a deadline's a deadline, and if it's not strict and it's not impossible or whatever, you'll never get close, right? It'll be 10 years instead of 39 months. And maybe if it's 39 months with all these impossible deadlines, it's, you know, something less than 10 years. But who knows? That's a bit of a personal statement. But getting to the meat of the matter, you know, repack and preparing for 3.0, I think there's two major considerations you should take into account. Purchasing the right antenna and purchasing the right transmitter, okay? So with regards to antenna, maybe one of the key things, because we all know that antennas aren't necessarily something you just go change out. It's not a tower light, it's bigger than that. But you know, ATSC 3's physical layer was designed, as we've talked about a lot today, to reach mobile, portable, handheld receivers, as well as, you know, or with indoor antennas, as well as the classic rooftop antenna. Does that through signal density, lower carrier to noise capabilities of PLPs, and improved error correction. So what's been out there in the industry, and this kind of started taking place actually in the ATSC MH. And I don't know if any of you put ATSC MH on the air, but ATSC mobile handheld, where we added the capability to be received by a mobile device in a high Doppler environment, lower signal to noise ratio environment within the ATSC 1 waveform, okay? And it's also a lot of where some IP ideas came in, because everything at the ATSC mobile space was, ATSC MH space was mobile, or IP protocol. From the front end. So Dielectric actually did a study on the amount of vertical polarization that would be helpful to be received on a mobile device. So, you know, TV stations are horizontally polarized to hit a rooftop antenna, and we're facing a near-term future where your device has not necessarily got a horizontally polarized antenna with a big metal aperture. It can be of any orientation, can be in the home, can be on the street, can be in a car. Think of FM with circular polarization. Well, the dielectric study came out and said that roughly 1/3 vertical component was close to ideal. So you get actually elliptical polarization, not circular polarization. But by adding a 1/3 vertical component to your radiation, now you're deliberately putting in polarization diversity in your transmission and your waveform out there in the marketplace to be picked up by receivers with antennas in any orientation. Okay? The trouble is that the reimbursement fund is not going to reimburse you for that. Okay? But what if you just put up a antenna, a like-for-like antenna as part of the repack, got reimbursed 100%, and 4 years down the road, it's like, well, we need to do ATSC 3.0. You got to replace, what are you going to do? I think there's the ability by a couple of the antennas to maybe go back and add vertical polarization when it's installed. I'm not sure on that. But if you spec your antenna for your repack as you need, perhaps the vendor can add a line item for what's it going to cost me to add vertical to this antenna and fund that yourself outside of repack reimbursement funds. And ultimately, you may get a lot more bang for your buck and a longer-term savings than turning around in 3-4 years or whatever the time may be and say, I got to replace this to be more effective and get more coverage. So I urge you to consider that with the antenna people as you're going through your repack dialogues with them. Okay? Could be a substantial long-term savings. Now regarding the transmitter, is the exciter that's coming with the package upgradable to 3.0? And will the transmitter support the additional average power for OFDM? And a lot of them will today. A lot of them that are currently out there will not. Okay, so if you actually reuse your transmitter, it may not. Okay, so if you were to take a transmitter that's maxed out on 8 VSB and put in ATSC 3, your power is going to typically drop about 2 dB. Your average power. That's because amplifiers, real-world things, are peak power limited. Okay, to get the linearity and so forth. We have to deal with peak power. In our lab, every day, our RF guys have a meter that's reading a cumulative distribution function of peak to average power ratio, and that's how we characterize the waveform. The amplifiers, the driver stages, everything has to faithfully be able to reproduce peaks, and the OFDM waveform has higher peak value than the 8 VSB waveform. So if the transmitter is being reused, that's something you need to take into account, and if you're speccing a new one, make sure that it'll do the average power necessary looking forward. And if you're adding vertical polarization, remember your licensed ERP is on horizontal. You're going to put some energy now in the vertical. You're going to have to add transmitter power to fill that. Okay? So, those are key. And that extra transmitter to fill the V-pole, again, is going to be on the station's budget, not going to be reimbursed by the fund. But then again, when's the best time to do it? So you're going to have to add capital if the replacement is higher power than the current transmitter, and again, longer-term savings by not having to replace the transmitter when you transition to 3.0. So those are two key considerations that I think you should look at when you're during the repack to be 3.0 ready, so you're not out there forklifting stuff again, gin polling stuff again. And if today didn't put you to sleep well enough, there's a good document you can read, the ATSC 3.0 Transition and Implementation Guide, that was put together by several of us in the industry. And you can get it from the Triveni website. you can get pointed to it. You can get it from our website, Dielectric, ERI. Many people's websites will point to this. It'll route you to the Gates Air website, as we're the kind of the registrar, I guess. You have to go in and get your name, put your name in and whatever to download it. But it's like 80 pages. But it starts with an executive summary of what is ATSC 3.0, what's it mean to me, technology and business-wise, and then gets into a lot of what we talked about today. So it's a good read. It should supplement everything you heard today, and be a good reference. You know, it's much more applicable than reading through the standard. You know, the standard's for like my engineering people to implement it. This is for like you guys to implement it at the station level. So that website, or if you got a scanner, scan that code and it'll take you there, or just Google that term, ATSC 3 Transmission Implementation Guide, and you're on your way. Okay, that's it from Rich and I today. We appreciate your attention. And as Larry mentioned at the top of the show, I wish Rich hadn't got a call and gone out, but he mentioned he needed a couple of heavy hitters. Rich has a lot bigger bat. Rich is the chairman of the ATSC Technical TG3, Technology Group 3, that put together everything ATSC 3. He herds an enormous amount of cats at ATSC. And he is also a very respected technical contributor to a lot of the content. So in terms of ATSC 3, there isn't a heavier hitter in the business right now than Larry was able to bring to you today. So thanks.
Thank you.